Selamat sore, teman-teman. Good afternoon. I hope that you are all well, and welcome to our presentation about studying Indonesian at the University of Sydney. So my name is Tom Power. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Indonesian Studies, and I'll be conducting half of the presentation today. But I'd also like to introduce you all to our fantastic student representative, Jennifer Yang.
Hi everyone, good to see you over the Zoom webinar.
Great. So what we're going to do today is to talk about what you might like to do if you were to take Indonesian studies at the University of Sydney. How would you go about it? What are the advantages? What are the benefits that you could derive from that? And we can talk about some of the opportunities that are also available to anyone who decides to come and study with our department. I'm hopeful that once we're able to share some of the advantages and experiences that you can draw out from studying Indonesian at the University of Sydney, that you might consider taking an undergraduate course, whether a major or a minor, with our department over the next 2 or 3 years of your academic life. So before we get underway, we should of course acknowledge the traditional custodians and owners of the country on which the University of Sydney campuses stand. We pay our respects to those who have cared and continue to care for country, and of course pay our respects to leaders past, present and future. Now, right through this presentation, for anyone who wants to ask a question, you're more than welcome to use the Q&A button that is available in this Zoom webinar. So you'll see a little Q&A button, type a question in there and we'll try to get to it at the end when we have a Q&A session. So the first question, of course, that I think many of you will be asking as you come into this seminar is, why study? What is it about Indonesia that is worthwhile learning about at the tertiary level when you're coming into university? Well, the first and most say is that Indonesia is a globally important country, okay? And there are many reasons for this. Firstly, it has the world's 4th largest population, okay? So it's a big country, lots of people, very dynamic, lots of opportunities for growth. It's the largest country in our region. So in the Southeast Asian region and the Asia-Pacific, Southern Asia-Pacific region, Indonesia is by far the largest country. And that means that it's a particularly important country for Australia. It has the world's largest Muslim population. This, of course, means that in this enormous religion that covers many parts of the world, Indonesia is one of the primary bastions, one of the major centers for the Islamic faith. It's the world's 3rd biggest democracy. So like Australia, Indonesia maintains certain traditions, certain values, certain institutions that mean that we have this sort of shared character, shared democratic values, which are very important once again for understanding, for building close relationships, and also for taking advantages of opportunities in one another's countries. And it's also the world's 4th biggest economy, or predicted to be the world's 4th biggest economy by 2040. So by the time that you are kind of in the middle of your careers, hopefully, Indonesia will be a really dynamic center for international commerce. And that means that if you're planning ahead, you're planning to enjoy a long career, potentially in business or in trade or in government, Indonesia is one of the places that you should really be looking to as a global leader when you are at the peak of your careers. And all of these factors are doubly true for Australians, okay? So for people who live in Australia. Not only is Indonesia our next door neighbor, but it is one of our most important relationships. So you may have heard that the largest embassy, Australian embassy overseas, is that located in Jakarta. This demonstrates how much money and how many people Australia is dedicating to the relationship with Indonesia. Indonesia also presents lots of career opportunities for Australians, for people like you, young Australians, okay? So you might want to work in government, potentially as a or as a bureaucrat, or in defense. You might want to work in business. You might see trade and investment opportunities in Indonesia. You might want to work in education, doing exchange work with Indonesia, potentially teaching Indian students or researching in Indonesia. There might be opportunities to work with non-governmental organizations. Many international NGOs are active in Indonesia, but you also have the opportunity, of course, to go and work for local NGOs. This might be in environmental issues, it might be in human rights, it might be in development, it might be in healthcare. So there's this diverse array of opportunities within the non-governmental sector. And then, of course, we have media and arts and tourism, all of which are growing sectors that provide opportunities for young Australians to pursue a career in Indonesia. And putting these sort of aspects to one side, so career or these big opportunities that might decide how you shape your life, how you choose your path in life, Indonesia is a very exciting and dynamic place to visit. So if you'd like to go overseas, if you'd like to spend time abroad, if you'd like to broaden your horizons and your understanding of the world, Indonesia is this very close, very proximate, but also extremely diverse and dynamic destination to pursue those goals. But why should you choose to study Indonesian at the university level, and particularly at the University of Sydney? Well, first, our department maintains a welcoming and collegial and egalitarian environment. I think this is really important. So when you're first arriving at the University of Sydney, when you're first starting as an undergrad, sometimes it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. You feel a little bit anxious. Will you have a circle of friends? How will you get on with your academic supervisors and your lecturers and your tutors? Will you know students who may be a little bit more senior who can provide advice and mentoring for you? Well, our department, because it's a relatively compact one, maintains this really good relationship, this really close relationship between lecturers and students, between older and younger students. Indonesian is also a really accessible language. So what that means is that if you come in as a complete beginner and you take Indonesian for 3 years, it's likely that you will have pretty good Indonesian proficiency at the end of your degree. Now, some languages that are really complicated, that are really difficult, it can be very, very hard to actually reach that level of usability and proficiency within a 3-year period. But with Indonesian, generally our graduates walk away with a good degree of fluency, and that's a really important quality in our graduates that we can take a lot of pride in. And we also have a very engaging program of study. So you're not simply studying language, okay? You're not just learning to speak Indonesian. You're learning about Indonesia. You're learning about diverse cultures, histories, the economics, the social circumstances, the politics, all of the aspects of Indonesian society are crucial aspects of the course that we offer to our undergraduate students. And of course, this is an issue that a lot of students would be really keen to hear more about. There are many opportunities for valuable study abroad and exchange programs that you can undertake and you can access during your undergraduate study at the University of Sydney. This is something that Jen will talk more about. And so hopefully if you have any questions, you can also ask her about her experience during our Q&A session. You can also look to broaden your career horizons by learning a strategic language. So Indonesian is classified as one of a handful of really strategic languages by the Australian government. And what that means is that if you learn Indonesian, you have an advantage when it comes to applying for work. When it comes to building your career, you will be seen as somebody, a particular set of skills that are very valuable and are very useful and widely applicable and in demand. So you're improving your ability to find work and to access those really interesting and exciting jobs going forward in your life, in your career. And finally, as we've touched upon, when you take this course of study, you're learning skills that you can apply right across your social science courses, social science units, of Sydney. So you might be learning about history, you might learn skills in research that you can then apply to a history course that is not about Indonesia. You might learn about international relations, and you can then apply those skills when it comes to learning about international relations in a dedicated IR course. You might learn about politics, culture, a whole range of different issues that you can then apply to these other subjects. So this is an opportunity to link your knowledge across a diverse array of disciplines through the study of language, another real strength of our department. Very briefly, we can touch on the program of study that you could undertake at Sydney and the people who would be teaching you. So there's a degree of flexibility in our program of study that really allows you to choose which avenue of study is best for you, depending on your existing degree of proficiency in the language, and also your previous experience of learning Indonesian, and the degree to which you want to become really fluent in Indonesian, or whether you sort of want to have just a basic grasp of the language that you can apply in your careers. So you might want to take a major in Indonesian studies, which would mean 48 credit points. Okay, so each unit of study is a 6 credit point block. Okay, so you could take 48 credit points, and this would mean that you're seen as having a very high degree of proficiency in Indonesian. Or you could take a minor, which is 36 credit points. So that's a 25% reduction. Okay, so a smaller block of study, a smaller number of units that give you that edge again when it comes to applying for jobs, when it comes to seeking out career opportunities. And the people who'd be responsible for teaching you would be our fantastic chair of the department, Bu Novi. Bu Novi's a wonderful teacher, vastly experienced as an Indonesian teacher, also very creative, very engaging, and extremely kind and warm. So you're welcome to contact her and ask her about the program. And the other person would be me. You can also send me an email if you'd like to learn more about any aspect of the programs that we offer at the university. And this is an indication of how you can structure your course depending on your degree of proficiency and your degree of confidence with the Indonesian language at the outset of your study. So there's an introductory pathway. This is for people who are new to studying Indonesian. And this would mean that you can take 2 language level units at the introductory level, and you can then develop into more complex language study over the next 2 years after that first year. There's an intermediate level. So for intermediate level students, people who might have studied to HSC level, so that may be some of the people listening into our presentation, you can start in sort of a second level unit of study, and you can then progress again into more complex material as you go forward, as you develop greater levels of confidence and proficiency in the language. And for some students who might have a heritage as an Indonesian speaker, they might have Indonesian speakers in their family, they might even be native speakers of Indonesian, they may have lived in Indonesia, you might be classified as an advanced language learner, in which case you would enter the Indonesian program at a level 3 degree of proficiency. So that means that you can then carry through to a major, even though you've entered the program with that particularly high degree of proficiency. So this means that there are lots of opportunities for people who are even native speakers of Indonesian to actually use that grasp of the language that you already possess and get really good academic qualifications in the language. And finally, we can touch on some of the themes and issues outside Indonesian language that are relevant and are taught by our department. So if you come into the Indonesian Studies department, you will learn about Indonesian politics and democracy. You'll learn about minorities and human rights, about development, so issues around the development of Indonesia as a nation, also economic development and social development, education, obviously an area of interest to many Australians who learn about Indonesia, religion and cosmology, traditional and popular culture, environmental issues and natural disasters, processes of economic change, criminality, corruption and extremism, and class, ethnicity, gender and sexuality. So you can see that this is a very broad grasp of Indonesian society that you can develop should you decide to study in this department. And this will be something that Jen will again talk a little bit more about, but we have some really interesting opportunities for students that are provided by the department. So the opportunity for in-country study and exchange is something that many of our students like to take advantage of. You might study with the Australian Consortium for In-Country Indonesian Studies. This allows you to do short courses at Indonesian universities or Indonesian institutions, or alternatively, a full semester or even a full year of study overseas, where you can become extremely proficient in the Indonesian language, you have full immersion in Indonesian society, and you can meet people not only from Indonesia, but from all around the world, as Jen will describe in greater detail. There's also opportunity to take a new Colombo Plan scholarship to study in Indonesia. So this is provided by the Australian government, and it's part of the Australian government's efforts to encourage Indonesian studies and Asian studies more generally at the university level. And then there are programs outside the university that are offered to Australian young people who are interested in doing exchanges to Indonesia. For instance, the Australia-Indonesia Youth Exchange Program, or AYEP. And this is open to people in their early 20s, I think 21 to 25. So maybe towards the end of your study, towards the end of your undergraduate study, you might plan to take part in a program like this and go and spend a couple of months living in an Indonesian village with an Indonesian family and a group of friends from Australia and Indonesia. On the campus, on the University of Sydney campus, we also have lots of really interesting activities, and we have a very strong and supportive community. So there are interclass activities and social gatherings. You can interact and communicate quite closely with your staff and also with other students. So this means that you build this sort of strong relationship with the people who are involved in your academic life. And generally, the staff and your student peers care about you as an individual. You're one of a small, tight-knit community rather than being one face among hundreds of people who might be in the really big course. There's also on-campus bodies and student bodies such as the Australia-Indonesia Youth Association and the Indonesian Students Association, who hold regular activities that you can attend. They might be public lectures or film screenings or roundtable discussions that you can get involved in to really further enhance your knowledge and also build that sort of broader social network. And there are also activities like the Australia-Indonesia Bridge Project and UniBridge, which allow you to communicate directly with people in Indonesia. So peers in Indonesia at Indonesian universities. And again, this is a method of online immersion that you can take advantage of. So I would encourage everyone who's watching to explore and experience Indonesian at the Department of Indonesian Studies. Now we'd like to introduce one of our alumna. This is a short video presentation by someone who has done very well having graduated from our department. And she's one of many dozens of people who've come through our department and have then pursued exceptional sort of career opportunities and done really, really well as graduates of the Department of Indonesian Studies. So introducing Anastasia.
Hi everyone, I'm Anastasia and I graduated from the University of Sydney in 2017 with a Bachelor of Arts majoring in Indonesian Studies and Sociology. I'm currently living in Singapore and I work at Facebook as a small business account manager. So essentially what I do is I provide small and medium businesses with advice on how they can grow their business online. So if you've got like an auntie, an uncle, maybe a cousin, who knows, who's maybe started off like their own candle business or their own photography business, it's very likely that the first thing that they've done is created an Instagram account or a Facebook account. So basically what I do is I provide that advice to those people. So it's been a lot of fun. Outside of work, I do a lot of volunteering in the local community, and I also won the National National Australian Indonesian Language Language Awards, also known as NILA, last year for the executive category, and I actually spoke about menstrual cups in relation to the theme of the environment. If you haven't already, make sure to enter NILA, because that is like the coolest awards. Would really recommend. In terms of studying Indonesian studies, how that helped me was actually that it helped me stand out in my interview process when I was going for the role. So when I initially saw that role, I mean, I just spoke to you about it now, the role itself was related to business, nothing to do with languages, right? But what happened was my manager saw that my Indonesian major, my experience, my volunteering, it really demonstrated that I could be able to bring a new insight and skill to the rest of the team. So working within the Singapore office, it means that you're working with people all around the world. So, I mean, not right now during COVID, but normally I'd be sitting behind people who spoke, actually the Indonesian team, sitting behind people, the Korean team, the India team. Studying Indonesian studies and understanding a society in depth means that I could be able to bring to the table those skills and understand those different nuances in each of the different markets. So for example, having that knowledge of understanding of how Indonesia interacts with Facebook in a different way compared to, say, Australia. And really being able to keep that in mind as I collaborate with those different teams and different projects that we're working on. So for example, last year we worked on a project relating to Instagram stories and how we can get Instagram stories to more businesses in the Asia Pacific region. So that Indonesian major like helped me bring skills like analysis, like research, like critical thinking that I wouldn't have been able to have had I not had this major. In terms of kind of what I would recommend, like any advice to you all watching, especially in this webinar today, I cannot recommend Indonesian studies enough. So I remember honestly sitting in your shoes. I was like in year 12 and I had no idea what I wanted to do. But the greatest thing is that when you go into university, you can really do your passions and you can just focus solely on your passions. If you do your passions, you do it well, opportunities will open up. It's okay that you don't have the plan right now. It's completely fine. If anything, that's great because it means that you have that freedom. And it's quite a beautiful thing having that. If you do well in your passion, like opportunities will open up. And I think when I was studying, I definitely didn't think that I'd be working in Singapore or at such a big tech company. But actually, I always had a passion for Indonesian and I always did well in that subject, that it meant that, you know, opportunities just ended up opening up. So I think I would definitely recommend, if you like Indonesian, take it. You know, you never know what will come up from there. And I really hope that, you know, especially during these times of difficulty, the importance of human connection is even higher, and languages really provides that opportunity to create that connection with people on a deeper level. So I hope that advice helps. Wishing you all the very best. I know these times are very tumultuous, but I really hope that you were able to find some value in that. And yeah, all the very best. Also, a very big shout out. Bu Nofi was my lecturer, best lecturer ever. Thank you always for nurturing my curiosity, and I'm sure you will do with more of these fellow alumni, which will hopefully come through into the future. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so that was a really interesting little presentation from Anastasia, and I can also second her endorsement of Ibu Novi as a fantastic teacher. Although if you want to experience Ibu Novi's fantastic teaching, you will need to enroll with our department. So now I'd like to introduce another wonderful person who will be talking about her experiences as a current student in our department, and that is Jen. Over to you, Jen.
Terima kasih banyak, Mas Tom. And hello, everyone. Selamat sore. My name is Jennifer, or Jen, and I am currently in my third year of a Bachelor of Arts and Advanced Studies at the University of Sydney. And I am majoring in art history and international relations. And I am also concurrently enrolled in a Diploma of Languages with a minor, of course, in Indonesian studies. And first of all, before I begin, I'd like to say that I'm really impressed that all of you guys have tuned in and are watching today. When I was in your position roughly 3 years ago, I had so much uncertainty going to university, and as a student who had dropped French and Latin as soon as possible while I was in high school, I had not considered, honestly, for even a moment, the possibility of studying language in university, much like Anastasia, which in hindsight seems really bizarre to me. So it's truly wonderful to speak to you guys today, students with an interest in pursuing language and cultural studies, and of course, Indonesian studies. And I really do hope that any insight that I can offer you will only encourage you further. And of course, as has been already iterated, if you guys have any questions for me or Tom, any questions at all, please feel free to use the Q&A function and we'll get right to your questions after I finish up. So what is it like to be a language student at Sydney? Well, I actually first began studying language at a university level when I enrolled in Mandarin Chinese studies as an elective for my first year of university. And let me tell you, it was honestly one of the best decisions I had made as a first year student. And I think that especially when you're transitioning from high school to university, it is a quite daunting and challenging transition. A lot of students do mention that they feel quite alone in these massive cohorts of students that are so different from your high school cohort. And I know that you go from seeing the same people every day to sitting in massive lecture halls, and then once the lecture ends, everyone seems to leave and you don't really see them again, or you have very little chance to really meaningfully interact with them. And of course, you can imagine with the current circumstances, it's become even more difficult in many ways to find opportunities to engage with your peers. But I have to say it's really, really completely different walking into or zooming into a class for language studies. Usually the cohort is smaller, and this definitely applies to Indonesian studies. But not only this, there's also an increased level of interactivity when you're studying language, not only because between the students, but also between students and teaching staff. And essentially this means you'll be in a really enthusiastic and supportive academic environment that really values your input as a student. And if you're anything like me, you'll also find that it adds a fantastic sense of community to your university experience. And actually this photo here is of me and a really lovely international postgrad student at USyd. Her name's Farah, and we had met during my first ever semester of Indonesian studies, with her coming into class to help some of us practice our Indonesian language. And this was actually taken when we met for the second time in Jakarta, which was unexpected but really exciting. And just one example of how you can really make some lasting connections through the language and cultural studies community at USyd. And you'll keep meeting them and you'll see them in the future. And it is really a valuable network that you're entering into. So ganti slide. Yep, awesome. So I thought I could talk a little bit about my experience on exchange in Indonesia as part of this presentation. I was fortunate enough to receive a New Colombo Plan mobility grant for 5 months from August 2019 to January 2020 on a semester-long exchange. And this involved intensive language classes, which were 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, along with some exchange units. So some units that were taken at Universitas Indonesia. And also an optional internship, which I did end up doing for 1 month in Jakarta at a fantastic contemporary art museum called Museum Machan, which was an amazing experience. And also, as Tom has mentioned, because the Australian government and Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade is really supportive of students looking to study in Indonesia and the region, you can usually access financial support for these kinds of exchange programs. I do think that it is important to acknowledge that global circumstances are a bit different at the moment. And of course, there is a great deal of uncertainty concerning when exchange experiences will become a possibility again. But what I can tell you though, confidently, is that the University of Sydney, the Sydney Global Mobility Team and the School of Languages and Culture absolutely believe in the reward and the importance of having international experiences available for students. And of course, once travel resumes, it will be all the more important for students to be going on exchange, to be part of these initiatives that rebuild connections and networks in a very valuable region that Australia is located in. So yeah. Ganti slide. I decided to compile a few photos for you guys from my time on exchange because I thought it might be a bit interesting to have a look. These are some photos of my lovely BIPA language class, and that is BIPA, that stands for Bahasa Indonesia untuk Penutur Asing, or Indonesian language for foreign speakers. So that's me. And these classes would have run every weekday from 8:30 a.m., which is very early in the morning for me, until 1 p.m. So as you can imagine, I got to know these people really well. And these are people from all over the world and of different ages. Most of them were actually old enough to be my parents, and it was a really interesting dynamic. And in this classroom full of people from South Korea, from Japan, the Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, and also many from countries outside of the Asia Pacific region, Bahasa Indonesia amazingly became a sort of bridge between us, even though our understanding of the language was so basic when we first began classes. And that was because in order to bond with our classmates and have those introductory small talk conversations, we relied on the language we were learning together in class. And that made for some really awkward but hilarious moments. But it was also an experience that encouraged us to improve our language skills and to not just learn the grammar and the spelling, but to also learn how to fundamentally communicate with each other. And on the very right, there's also an image here of my sociology class at Universitas Indonesia, which was integrated with both international and domestic students. And I made some wonderful friends in this class. They were very, very welcoming and friendly. And it was also a very nice way to experience university culture in Indonesia, which is very different, I think. Without being confined to that bubble of international students, you can sometimes find yourself trapped in. And ganti slide. Great. So of course I could not leave out a slide all about travel. I definitely think that Indonesia is one of the most beautiful places you could go to for an exchange program. And there are so many places to explore. I know that all of the BEPA students were desperately trying to cram in miniature holidays every single weekend, and this includes me. And these are just some photos from a few trips that I managed to squeeze in. The first one on top, on the left, was taken at Taman Mini Indonesia Indah in Jakarta with my international student buddy group. And it's a park that is really cool because it showcases the diversity of Indonesian culture, and they have a lot of small replicas of rumah adat, or traditional housing from different parts of Indonesia. And the photo below it was taken in Bandung with a few friends that I made, posing. And the one on the very right, which I'm sure some of you might recognize, is of Candi Prambanan in Jogja. And I was fortunate enough to travel there by myself. It's the largest Hindu temple site in Indonesia and the second largest in Southeast Asia. And it was a beautiful place to visit and an absolutely incredible experience to be able to go there and see in person. So ganti slide. Great. So finally, I'd like to add that there is so much to take out of an exchange experience, and I had no clue at the time, but my decision to enroll in the Indonesia immersion program and continue my studies in Indonesian language and culture led me to so many valuable and truly enriching experiences, whether that took the form of an ambassadorship for the New Colombo Plant Initiative, or whether that was meeting with students at schools in Jakarta, or even just sitting down for afternoon tea and having a chat after my classes with my neighbours in Depot, with the occasional assistance of Google Translate before I got more familiar with the language. And although I know for you guys the possibility of exchange might seem a bit distant, I don't think that's the case at all. And I hope that the broader message that I can convey today is that there are so many opportunities out there for students who take the time to deeply study and engage with language and culture. And as you can see from Anastasia's video, which is so amazing, you can see how successful she is. Language studies can truly take you to so many places in quite a literal sense, but also down so many pathways you might never have imagined for yourself previously. So I think I will end my part of the presentation on that note. I hope you guys found that interesting and you're feeling a bit inspired and encouraged to take Indonesian studies, which would be amazing. And yeah, please ask away if you have any questions. I'll now be handing over back to Mas Tom for our Q&A session. Thanks, Tom.
Terima kasih banyak, Mbak Jen. Jen's presentation reminded me of my very distant historical exchanges to Indonesia when I was an undergrad. It was one of the most fantastic experiences of my life, really. Okay, so now we have the opportunity for some Q&A. we'll see if there are any questions coming through in our Q&A. Yeah, I think we might have a couple here. Okay, so the first question that I think we should address is this issue of travel and the pandemic. So obviously, at the time of this presentation, at the time of this meeting, we are restricted in our ability to travel to Indonesia. So all of these fantastic exchange opportunities that Jen was just describing are currently suspended. Okay, and it's sort of an elephant in the room, right? Because we all know that that's the case. This is a very widespread problem. This is not only affecting universities, it's affecting the entire world, right? Societies all around the globe. Now, I would suggest that looking forward, it may actually be quite a good opportunity for students who are starting study of Indonesian next year in 2021 to spend that first year really consolidating their language skills, and then looking to do that exchange in 2022 or 2023, when hopefully we have, once again, the ability to travel overseas. So that's a really important question. And my suggestion is that for most of you, we would assume that it would not limit your opportunities. I think Jen has had some recent interactions with the exchange, people who are running the exchange programs at the University of Sydney. So maybe you want to add something to that, Jen.
Yeah, well, I'm actually still an acting ambassador for the New Colombo Plan, and I do have a bit of information about that. So at the moment, most of the Sydney Global Mobility programs are cancelled. They're being held off for now. There was one that was taken online, and that was Experience Italy, but there is still a bit of uncertainty, so I can't answer for sure. But I can tell you that the New Colombo Plan, both the scholarships and the mobilities, are still accepting applications. So unfortunately, the 2020 application round has already passed, but if you are wanting to apply next year, you can still apply. And what they are referring to is just official DFAT advice on whether it's safe to travel to particular countries. So on Smart Traveller, the website. But in the event that you've already applied and you're successful and you're notified, but when it comes around to your exchange program, there's obviously there might be a chance that you still can't travel, then your exchange can actually be deferred to the end of the degree or to a later stage in your degree. So you could possibly apply next year, and if you could not go, you would still have that scholarship under your name, but you would possibly wait until you graduate, and then as soon as you graduate, you're off. So that's what the official DFAT stance is for the New Colombo Plan, and I can tell you that with certainty. So yeah, I think that's a good indicator of where the government stands on the idea of student exchange and facilitating that. Everyone's really keen to get it back up and running. So definitely don't feel discouraged if you feel that you might not have a chance to go and exchange. There's always going to be an opportunity to have that international experience.
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously, as Jen said, just to reiterate, the university is very strongly committed to ensuring that those opportunities are available as soon as possible. And over that 3-year period, over the course of your degree, it's very likely that you would have that opportunity. So there's a great question here also from Haris. Are there any Indonesian societies at USyd? Well, one of the Indonesian societies that we just very briefly mentioned, and we don't have sort of that much time to go into the details previously, is the PPIA, or the Indonesian Students Association. So this is an association of Indonesian students who've come over from Indonesia to study in Australia at the University of Sydney, who run a whole range of activities and are always really, really welcoming to domestic students who would like to learn more about Indonesian. So I'm not certain, but perhaps the Indonesian student who was on it was at your first slide, Jen, you had a picture of someone who might have come, I think, from the Indonesian Students Association and was actually engaged in student mentoring or in assisting first-year Indonesian students in developing their language skills from scratch. So this is one of the really fantastic things about studying at an international university like USyd, is that you do have this opportunity to meet with Indonesian native speakers who are coming to Australia to study. And we also have, of course, the Australia-Indonesia Youth Association, which has branches right around the country, but of course, the New South Wales branch is really centred on the University of Sydney. And that association, the AIYA, or AYA, runs a whole range of activities also that you can get involved in, where you would have that ability to network and build up a sort of a broader range of friends who might be Indonesians, they might be Australians who are interested in Indonesian studies, they might be your classmates, they might be former students who are continuing to participate in that association and so on. So those sorts of opportunities are certainly available, and those are things that we really encourage and that we try to ensure we continue to support as the centre of academic study here. Okay, any other questions? We had a quick question about the Diploma of Indonesian Studies. So very, very quickly, there is the opportunity for people who have completed degree. They might be a graduate from a different course to then take a Diploma of Indonesian Studies, which is the equivalent of a major. It gives you that academic qualification. So if you're someone who has perhaps done a different course and then maybe at the end of that course you think, oh, I really wish I'd done Indonesian, you do have that opportunity to then acquire that diploma at that sort of point of graduation from your undergraduate degree. And you can also study it concurrently, as Jen was just pointing out. So it's a really good opportunity to have that qualification, even if it isn't part of your degree major, right? Maybe you'd like to talk about that as well, Jen.
Yeah, just quickly, I'd like to talk about it. So the reason why I'm in the diploma and doing it concurrently is because I had no idea that I wanted to do Indonesian studies or language studies as a major, and I had already enrolled in 2 majors, and I was so stressed. I was like, how am I going to have room in my degree for more subjects? I don't think I could take it as an elective consistently. And I was talking around to people, and I realized so many people were actually doing a diploma of language alongside their normal majors or major. And it's not stressful at all. You're still doing a full-time workload, but you're just effectively extending your degree by a year. So I had a 4-year degree with 2 majors, and that changed it to 5 years because you are doing it 48 credit points is a diploma. But I really recommend it. It's a really good way to, expand your field of study. And as Tom was mentioning before, Indonesian studies is really valuable because there are so many intersections between Indonesian studies and other areas of interest, of scholarly interest. And I'm finding now that Indonesian studies just adds a whole nother layer to my perspective that I'm taking to art history or international relations. And that is truly really valuable. So, yeah.
A really good point, Jen. Yeah. So basically what Jen is saying is that you can have your full course of study in a particular discipline that interests you. It might be a completely different discipline to Indonesian studies, but you can then enhance that with the diploma without sacrificing any of that other disciplinary study that you might want to do. That's a really good point, Jen. Thank you very much for that. Any more questions? I think we're running pretty short of time, so we might have to wrap it up there. Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on to the very final part of today's presentation. And this is a little fun exercise that maybe some people will hopefully enjoy. This is a quiz that we'll be conducting through Slido.
Terima kasih, Mas Tom. Okay, so I think we are ready to start the quiz. Hopefully the question should show up on the screen. Great. Okay, so we have our first question. Sorry for the delay. How many islands comprise the Indonesian archipelago? Is it A5, B over 17,000, C 1,758, or D almost 10,000? By the way, you have about 30 seconds to answer, so don't take too long. Wonderful. So yes, the answer is B over 17,000. And most of you looks like you got it, most of you guys got it correct, which is great. And we'll move on to the next question. So which of these is not an Indonesian food? I wonder if any of you guys have heard of these or even tried these. Is it A, nasi goreng? Is it B, gado-gado? Or C, satay ayam? Or is it D, lemari es? Yep, and we'll go to the answer. That's right. So lemari es is actually a refrigerator. It is not a food, unfortunately, but you guys got it all correct. So great. We'll move on to the next question. So the Indonesian words mata and hari translate respectively to eye and day. Can you guess the English meaning of the Indonesian word matahari? Is it A, a daisy, B, the sun, C, origin or new beginnings, or is it D, optometry? Awesome, so the answer is actually the sun. So most of you guys got it right, which is pretty good. Great. So we'll move on to the next question, which is the second last. Which of these English words is derived from the Indonesian word kakatoa? Is it A, caricature, B, cacophony, C, crocodile, or D, cockatoo? Perfect. And it is actually cockatoo. So once again, most of you guys got it right, which is great. And we'll move on to our very, very last question for today, which will end our quiz. How many languages are spoken in Indonesia? Is it just 1, or is it 7, or is it 70, or is it over 700, which seems like quite a lot? So time's up and we'll go to our answers. It is actually over 700. If that surprises you, it is very, very amazing, an amazing fact. And it really just showcases how diverse Indonesia is. And Bahasa Indonesia is just one language that's spoken officially, but it's actually the second language to so many people who call Indonesia home, which is really incredible. And that will basically wrap up our quiz and our presentation today. And just as we come to the end of the presentation, we'd just like to thank you all once again for tuning in and watching. Terima kasih banyak. Thank you. And if you're looking for any more information on Indonesian studies, you can definitely find out via this link here, or just by going to the University of Sydney website and looking under the Faculty of Arts and looking in the Indonesian department. And there's heaps of information there. Otherwise, thank you again for tuning in. And I'd just like to say, good luck, best of luck for your future studies. Semoga sukses. And also terima kasih untuk Mas Tom for his brilliant presentation. And I'll pass on to him if he has any final words for you guys.
Terima kasih banyak, Mbak Jen. Thank you for your fantastic presentation and for moderating the quiz and for answering questions from our audience. It's been a real pleasure to have you so actively and enthusiastically and wonderfully participate in today's event. I really hope that we will see at least some of the people who are attending this event and who are participating in this event enrolling in Indonesian studies at the University of Sydney, whether it's next year or the year after that or one of the years to come. So, you know, when you're interested in embarking on that undergraduate course of study, bear in mind all of the opportunities that we've discussed today. And I really look forward to meeting at least some of you in our classrooms of the future. Hopefully you will also get to meet Jen as one of our outstanding students. So thank you all once again, and semoga sehat selalu. Terima kasih banyak dan sampai ketemu di Universitas Sydney.